Hey, hey, how you doing? Hey, last time we saw each other it was kind of cold, so yeah. Well, hey, hey, I'm Cortes, and I'm a critic, and welcome back. Uh, yeah, we're officially in spring now, so we don't need that anymore, and well, I am sure due for a good grooming eventually. So, but like I promised you, we are back, and we're talking about the 2026 NFL Draft recap. And boy, there was a lot of mistakes on my part and some others. There were some great victories. There were some surprising. There were some like I saw that coming a mile away. And there were some of what are you doing? And then there were some like, yeah, he fell to them. Huh. Congrats to that. Congrats to that. So usually when I draw this video, I always go with the team that got Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick of the draft, and that is my starting point. And the team that got the last pick is the Denver Broncos. So to start our 2026 NFL Draft recap, we are going to the AFC West and talking to the Denver Broncos. And they kind of started their draft earlier. Let's talk about it. So for the Denver Bronco fans, this is a situation I asked to all, teams. I mean, you were the number one seed in your conference. You had 14-3. You won the division. Everything went right for Denver. So it's always that notion of teams that win the Super Bowl and teams that were like in the conference championship level, the top 4 teams. You just ask yourself, what do you really need in the draft when you were already there? And Seattle won the Super Bowl, so I'm sure I'll bring back that question up again. What do you really need because you're already there? And for Denver, we all probably know the argument is that if Bo Nix didn't get hurt, more than likely Denver probably would have beaten the Patriots. Maybe they could have beaten the Seahawks, but at least the game probably was more entertaining. But I think a lot of us felt that confidently, especially the way that game went. If Bo Nix was there, more than likely it felt like Denver was probably going to steal the win from New England and give us a better Super Bowl. That was the thought anyway. But it didn't happen, so we move on. And now Denver goes in to this draft class, and they really did address players. Felt more of we want depth, not so much we need. I think the biggest need they need was getting Sutton another wide receiver. And I said in my video, my recap, I did feel like that Denver needed to get a wide receiver. And then they traded Waddle, their first round pick. So technically, like I said, they already did address their wide receiver need by getting Waddle. And I feel like that acquisition is probably bigger than I think people are understanding. Not because he's a veteran, he's a proven player. It's just that you got to understand that feeling of getting a reliable wide receiver. Like, I feel Waddle helping Denver is going to impact them more than Mike Evans helping San Francisco. Let that sink into everybody. So, like I said, they kind of used their pick and then they traded back. So they didn't really get their initial first pick until the 3rd round. And before we get to that, I need to do a quick confirmation. So, with this in the 3rd round, with the 66th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos selected Tyler Oyedem, defensive tackle, Texas A&M. Now, Denver was top 2 defense. So usually when you think of defensive players, you can't help but feel if you want depth. Now, Picking 66 is nothing to sneeze at, but getting an interior defensive tackle who was top 11, he was number 11 in his position. So that's, still fairly high for that. My question is probably for depth rotation. According to ESPN.com, Oyunum is currently viewed as the backup to Malcolm Roach on the left defensive end because they do run a 3-4 defense. And I feel like for a 3-4 defensive end is basically just a more athletic defensive tackle, while the nose guard are basically the anchors, I stop everything defensive linemen. So when it comes to a 3-4 defense, your defensive ends are basically just glorified defensive tackles with a little more athleticism. That's why Dominican Sue was so successful when he was with the Buccaneers in that, even though he was probably a 3 technique type defensive tackle in a 4-3 defense. But in 3-4, he was still able to thrive and still make plays, even though he was technically a defensive tackle playing defensive end. So to me, this feels more as rotation. Keep that Denver defense going. Put some young bloods in there, preparing for the future, but also not really forced into development. And I'm not saying because he's a 3rd-round pick. We all know that players as late as 7th round can become stars, and some even great stars in this league nowadays. The thing that has officially been dissected that we don't need to worry about where you're placing. I think now it's become more of a case of if you're drafted, that basically means we expect or hope that your development could lead to starter. Maybe not star power, but starter. Or at least a major contributor worth using this on our 7 overall picks. Some teams have 10, some people have 3. Denver has 7 going into this draft class. So with next they'll go to be the 4th round, and with the 108th overall pick in the 2026 NFL draft, the Denver Broncos selected Juwan Coleman, running back, Washington. I was wondering not if or when Denver would select a running back, but I was expecting they would probably go for a big back, because J.K. Dobbins, no disrespect to the man, he has been hurt a little too frequently lately. And he comes in, but J.K. Dobbins is a 5'10 running back. R.J. Harvey, he is 5'8. He's a 5'8. And Coleman, is another under 5'10. He's a 5'8, 5'9, 228. So he's a little thicker for a short guy. It just, I feel like maybe the Juwan is more of an insurance policy for, God forbid, J.K. Dobbins gets hurt again and we lose him again. Because RJ did a lot on his rookie season. He was very successful, and we're very grateful for that. But I kind of feel like this sounds more like a potential insurance policy more than we look at him as, because his playing style probably is similar to the other 2 running backs ahead of him, just younger. So I'm guessing Sean Payton is manipulating his running back carousel, because for those of us that remember New Orleans, Sean Payton won with a variety of running backs. Pierre Thomas, Reggie Bush. He didn't really have the Derrick Henrys or the drawing a blank on his name right now, but Adrian Peterson. Thank you. Blech. I'm trying to think of a dominant running back in his prime that took care of a team himself. He didn't have that. He had players that basically were contributors. Could they carry the game themselves? Of course they can. But never once he put a running back in that position of, this guy is going to do probably 60 to 70%. He doesn't have a Bijan Robinson. Now, God forbid, if he gets a Bijan Robinson type, we're all screwed. But Sean Payton is able to make running backs that some may consider to be B- players, or maybe C+ on a good day, and he makes it turn into something great. So I don't want to respect JK, but Coleman just feels like he's similar to what we have before, and we're trying to make sure that JK doesn't become a liability if he gets hurt again in his fairly young career for a guy of his talent. So that's where I'm putting him under. Coleman is reliable and is going to keep the flow going, not putting a lot of pressure on RJ. Then still in the 4th round, we go to the 111th pick. So with the 111th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos selected Cage Casey, offensive tackle, Boise State. So with a good running back, you probably want to get a good offensive tackle. Cage Casey was a player that I see because I'm from Tampa, so I'm a Bucks fan. So Bucks fans, you listen to local people about players. Cage Casey was one of those players that I heard that Tampa Bay was potentially, if not Tampa, but basically the local reported community was thinking that keep an eye on him. He's a 6'6", 310-pound offensive tackle. To me, that is prototype size. He's not heavy, but he's tall. So he's not like, he's basically just a glorified, think about it, 40 pounds less, he's a tight end basically if he has hands. So he has a more athletic offensive tackle, and I think for the way Denver likes to play the offense, and Bo Nix, they want to keep him protected so they don't have to scramble for his life. But this feels like a prototype. This feels like he has all the intangibles. Let's just, let's do some sanding. Let's do some trimming. Let's, bulk him up, but also get more muscle. Let's get his brain filled with the intangibles and how we want to do it. So, as the 6'6", 310 pounds has the benefits of he's tall and big, but not big as in 330, 340. He doesn't have that feeling of he's heavy, he's big. And right now they have him, according to the ESPN.com mock draft, they have him being moved to a guard behind Ben Powers in the left guard. So that's another thing too. His intangibles probably fit more to be on interior side. Sometimes we've seen offensive tackles, they play tackle for 3 or 4 years in college and they get moved to guard. It happens in the league. Could it be impactful to play at Boise State, so the level of competition is a factor? Or could it be that they feel like, let's not force him to the tackle position, but if he can play great guard now, we can develop him there, and then he becomes a solid guard. Sometimes we've seen that happen in the league. Players that don't play good at one position, but they switch to the one on the offensive line, they become more valuable. Heck, there was an offensive tackle that was drafted out of Notre Dame for the Buccaneers, and he got moved to center, and now he's a center now in Jacksonville. So sometimes your new position is the right position in the NFL. And that's the cool thing about being an offensive lineman. If your intangibles are valuable, you have more value to offer. Then we go to the 5th round. With the 152nd pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos selected Justin Jolly, tight end, North Carolina State. So this one I was thinking that they would address the tight end position earlier, but then again, they traded to the 3rd round, so maybe, this was probably the right spot. They were going to pick him anyway. But Justin Jolly is what I like to call a thick receiver. Justin Jolly is a tight end, but he's 6'3", 241. We have seen 6'3", 225, 230 wide receivers thrive in this league, some better than others. Justin Jolly to me feels like he's an athletic receiver, and you cannot tell me you don't think that Sean Payton, who made Jimmy Graham fantastic, a devastating tight end, basically was a glorified wide receiver at New Orleans, and then helped his career in Green Bay and Seattle, and then came back to New Orleans and still had that case of still got it. You don't think that Sean Payton, looking at his tight end pool, thinking Justin Jolly could be another one of our athletic tight ends? Because we all know that currently right now the Denver Broncos tight end pool is Ingram. And Ingram has been in the league for a while. Not shaming the dude for, being a little older veteran, but let's be real. Tight ends or any position that have been in the league for multiple teams in there, you kind of want to develop something yourself. Ingram is a good starting point. He has proved his worth this year, so it's not like he's been a slacker or even a hindrance to the program. But to me, Justin Jolly is one of those players that I feel like there are some coaches you can just be like, that's a Sean Payton pick, that's an Andy Reid pick, that's a Bill Belichick pick, and this one feels that's a Sean Payton pick. A tight end that offers more as a receiving threat than just the prototypical tight end of a good blocker that can catch very effectively. No. This is a guy where I feel like if he develops well, they will put him in the slot and do his matchup against the nickel. And that's where I feel like that's why Sean Payton was really happy to get him. And he was one of those players that, as a Buccaneer fan, I was seeing him because I felt like the Bucks were going to address the tight end department, but they went with him, even though the Bucks did get someone kind of similar as being a more athletic than a blocker. But that's for the Bucks from the time for Bucks. But for me, this feels like that's a Sean Payne pick. Don't be surprised if Justin Jolly gets more effective in the offense than initially planned. See week 6, week 7, maybe week 10, he starts being more of a factor than we give him credit for as a late round pick rookie. Then the last 3 picks are all in the 7th round. So basically, this is glorified special teamers and depth players and maybe even projects. So in the 7th round, with a 246th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos selected Miles Scott, safety, Illinois. Now, this is kind of funny. When I was looking up his numerical stats, his height, his weight, according to ESPN.com, there's nothing. He has nothing. All the other players, I refreshed my screen. I thought maybe it was a website thing, but nope. But had to go to the actual depth chart on ESPN.com to find out his numbers. And he's a pretty small safety. He's 5'11", 210. Obviously sounds like a project player. He's currently 3rd on the depth chart on the free safety department. So this clearly feels as a special team contributor. I always felt like defensive backs have a better chance to making the 53-man roster because I feel like defensive backs are players that are used to tackling and used to being physical. So therefore, running down as gunners and making tackles is also effective. And 2, they're used to hitting. And off corners, corners or DBs, they have to change based on what they see. So their inability to change quickly and to keep their speed and keep their stamina up as they do it is effective. So Miles Scott sounds like a project player that developed into special teamers, and we'll see what happens as the season goes on. But he's on a very good defensive team, so he will be led by very good coaching this upcoming season. Then 10 picks later, we go to the last 2 picks of the draft both go to Denver. So in the 7th round, with a 256th pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos selected Dalen Bentley, tight end, Utah. Now, this one feels more the idea. He's 6'4", about 10 pounds heavier than Jolly was. But this one feels prime for, we'll develop you, we'll see what you can do. Probably going to make his spots on special teams and contributing there. But that doesn't mean just because they got a tight end a couple of picks before you doesn't mean they're not evaluating you. Jolly may be used more as a receiver threat. You might be used more as a blocking threat that can catch. Both can catch. That's fantastic. But it keeps the defense guessing to find out who they have to cover when we go to 2 tight end sets when you 2 go into play. So to me, he is the perfect, over 6'2", over 250 pounds. Clearly meant to be a more physical, probably a blocker, and probably the ability with hands, but like I said, I really feel like Justin's been used as a receiver more than a blocker, while Bentley I see more as a blocker than a receiver. Doesn't mean they both can do the same. I'm just saying that's what I'm feeling. And then the last pick of the NFL Draft for the Denver Broncos and the entire draft, which is always kind of fun. Mr. Irrelevant himself. In the 7th round with the 257th, the last pick of the 2026 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos selected Red Murdoch, linebacker, Buffalo. Always need depth at linebacker. Small school, showed great development. Something there. He's 6'2", 232. Productivity in Buffalo. Regardless if you are the first pick or the last pick, to be selected in the top 57 players from a small school is something to be very proud of. Yes, you're Mr. Irrelevant, and because of Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant is no longer a throwaway pick and just a gesture of, you're the last of the good. That doesn't mean anything. He's going to a very well defensive office with a lot of defensive players that have a lot of development and a lot of able to teach. So I think Murdoch's going to a prime position. He's clearly going to be there for depth on special teams and make his mark. We'll see how the season goes for him. But if he develops well and keeps his head strong and, of course, stay healthy, he'll make the 50-man roster and then work his way up in rotation in due time. But to me, Red should be very proud that he made the 257 player, selection. The Denver Broncos used their pick on him, and he wasn't just a collection of undrafted free agents like some teams do. They just collect people, kind of like you're scooping a bunch of goldfish from a bowl. No. So this guy clearly is development, but potential is there, and that's why the Denver Broncos used the pick on him and not some other position. Defense was already good. They just want to make sure that it develops, stays good. So that is the Denver Broncos 2026 draft class. What I do when I do these videos, I always go, who's my favorite player? Who's the player I am most excited? And for the Denver Broncos, it is Justin Jolly, your tight end from NC State. He's the one I am most excited because it just feels like a Sean Payton pick, an athletic wide receiver who just happens to be, a tight end. He's a little heavier, but man, I just feel like Sean Payton is going to do it. Because even though Ingram was there, I still felt like Bo Nix didn't have the receiving core he wanted. Now he has Waddle. Now, of course, you got Sutton. Troy Franklin is still there, teammates. But I just feel like, man, having a two tight end set with Ingram and Justin here, two very athletic wide receivers that happen to be tight ends, just feels like a Sean Payton move. And now when I do this, I always go by, did this draft class help them, hurt them, or we're still kind of like waiting? And it's kind of hard to say how much can this draft class do when a team was already 14-3 and basically one half away from a Super Bowl berth themselves. So this draft class did not hinder them. I don't think they're stalemate, and I'm going to count the Waddle thing as a complimentary draft because they gave up a first-round pick for him. So as far as I know, Denver, with this draft class added to the roster, they are still contenders. I mean, there's nothing more I can really say. They went so far with so little that you feel like what they have now going in just feels like, well, they can't really get worse, right? They didn't lose anything. Everyone is still there. Coach is still there. Development's still there. And these players coming in, nothing here feels like a waste. Now, they may not all contribute right away in this first season. God forbid injuries, of course. But this just feels like depth and rotation. Sometime maybe it's best to sit down for a few seasons and learn and not be thrust in. And then if you don't do it within your first two games, they think of you as a bust. Sometimes that's how impatient we all can be. But to me, the Denver Broncos, you're still contenders. And in the end, that's what matters. So, that is the Denver Broncos. And you know how the song and dance goes? Since we're in the AFC West, we're going to stay in the AFC West. And the team we're going to go to next, well, I think it's kind of appropriate that the last pick was the Denver Broncos, which means we need to go to the team with the first overall pick. So next time we'll be talking about the Las Vegas Raiders, as they got the number 1 overall pick. And, well, you already know who he is. But that'll be for next time. But until then, I'm Cortez, and I'm a critic. Thank you so very much for watching.